What's up, y'all? It's Mr. Canada, and welcome to my math domain. In this video, we're going to be learning about how to write a linear equation in point-slope form. We're going to be looking at examples from a table, from 2 points, and also including a graph. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and talk about what point-slope form is and what type of information we're trying to work for whenever we're trying to write an equation in point-slope form. So here are the key features from point-slope form. The following equation is y minus y1 is equal to m multiplied by x minus x1. So this is the point-slope form of the line, and it's one of the 3 ways we could write a linear equation. One thing to note is that in order to write a linear equation in this form, you're going to need 3 things. You're going to need the slope of the line, and you're also going to need a coordinate point, x1 comma y1. As you're going to see through these examples, by just calculating the slope, you're going to have all the information you could possibly need in order to write an equation in this form. So let's go ahead and look at our first example and kind of explore what these steps are going to be. So look at this first example here. We have a table where x's are 3, 7, 11, and 15, and the y's are -8, -2, 4, and 10. Let's go ahead and try to write a linear equation in point-slope form from this table. One of the first things you have to realize is that the first step in order to write an equation, a linear equation more specifically, is to find the slope. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing here, is we're going to go ahead and calculate the slope. Now, one thing that I'd like to do whenever I calculate the slope is that I'd like to label the numbers so that it's easier for me to know where the numbers are going to go in the slope formula. So check this out. I'm going to label this as x1 and y1, and label the second point as x2 and then y2. By doing this one thing, it makes my life a little bit easier whenever I'm calculating slope. So the slope formula is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Okay, so y2 is going to be -2 minus y1 is going to be -8 divided by x2 is going to be 7 minus x1 is going to be. Now be careful to not accidentally subtract the numbers across, because remember, we're trying to subtract the y's and we're also trying to subtract the x's. So let's simplify this a little bit. So -2 minus -8. So if we're not too comfortable with our negative integers, we can always use a scientific calculator on Desmos, or we can use the calculator that's on our phone. So let's go ahead and calculate that. So -2 minus parentheses -8. And that leaves us with an answer of 6. So that means that the answer up here is going to be 6 divided by 7 minus 3 is going to get us 4. Now we want to simplify this fraction as much as we can. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. So 6 divided by 4, okay, gets me a decimal 1.5. I would recommend that you try to write your slope as a fraction. But really that's a preference, but I would recommend that you write it as a fraction. So if you press the convert to fraction, it'll change this 1.5 into a 3/2 on Desmos. So that means this simplifies into 3/2, or if you really want to keep your answer as a decimal, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong. So either way, your slope is going to be 3/2, or in this case, or 1.5. So let's make a note of that your slope is going to be equal to 3/2 or 1.5. So we pretty much have all that we need here, because in order to write a linear equation in point-slope form, like I mentioned before, all we need is a slope and an x1, y1 point. But guess what? We already know what x1 is and what y1 is. Because when we calculated the slope earlier, we labeled what x1 and y1 is from the table. So one thing is to just identify what your x1 is and what your y1 is. So in this case, our x1 is going to be 3, and our y1 is going to be -8. Now all we have to do from here is take the slope that we had, take the x1 and the y1 that we got from the table from our work from slope earlier, and basically put it together into an equation. So how do we write an equation in point-slope form using the given information? Well, here's how. Let's start by writing down the actual equation itself. y minus y1 equal to m x minus x1. Now let's go ahead and plug in the information that we worked for into the appropriate locations. So y minus, well, my y1, according to what we boxed earlier, is going to be -8. So I'm going to go ahead and put parentheses, -8, equals my slope. Well, we did that in step 1. That's going to be 3 over 2. Parentheses, x minus x1, which in this case is going to be 3. My suggestion would be is to simplify any double negatives that you see. So in this case, we can continue simplifying by changing this double negative into a plus. So y plus 8 is equal to 3 over 2, x minus 3. So anytime they ask you to write a linear equation in point-slope form, these are the steps that you want to take. Now the work for this is very similar if you try to write an equation from 2 points. So let's go ahead and check that out. So look at this next example here. You have 4, 7 and 5, 1. So step 1 is let's go ahead and kind of calculate the slope here. Again, I always recommend that you try to label the points that you're trying to work with because it's going to become really clutch whenever you are trying to identify x1 and y1. So here's our slope. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So y2 is 1 minus y1 is 7 divided by x2 is 5 minus x1 is 4. So 1 minus 7 is -6 divided by 5 minus 4 is +1. So when we simplify this, we will get -6. So right off the bat, we know that m is equal to -6. Now let's identify what x1 and what y1 is going to be. Now, if you label your points ahead of time, you automatically know what the answer is. x1 is going to be 4, and y1 is going to be 7. Now that we're armed with this information, now we can write an equation from those 2 points. So let's go ahead and create some space here. Let me kind of get this blue marker so we can kind of differentiate our answers. It looks already really messy, but that's okay. So y minus y1 equal to m x minus x1. Remember that we have to follow these steps in case they ask us to write an equation in point-slope form. So y minus, well, my y1 is 4, so y minus 4. My slope is -6, parentheses, x minus, well, my x1 is 7. So then we put a 7 here, and we're pretty much done. That is our equation in point-slope form. Again, keep in mind what we're trying to shoot for here. If they asked you to write an equation, let's say, in slope-intercept form instead, the steps are going to be different because they're asking you to write an equation in y equals mx plus b. But whenever they ask us to write a linear equation in point-slope form, this is what we're trying to shoot for. We're not simplifying anything, like we're not going to distribute, we're not going to move +4. We don't have to do anything but to calculate slope and make sure that we plug in the numbers in the right spot. Let's look at one more example, but this time let's look at a graph. So here is a nice, pretty red line. Let's go ahead and find a point-slope form linear equation for this graph. So what does that have to look like? Well, again, step 1 is that we want to calculate the slope. We want to calculate the slope. So one thing that we can do to make our life maybe a little bit easier is we can label these points as the appropriate coordinate. So for example, we can sort of label this point as -2, 1. We could also label this point as 2, 3. And by doing this, then we can go ahead and label what our x1 and our y1 is going to be. This is also especially useful if they don't give you any points, because then you would have to go out of your way to find those points, and it would be absolutely nice if you knew what numbers you were working with. Okay, so let's go ahead and calculate the slope then. So y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So y2 is going to be 3 minus y1 is going to be 1 divided by x2 is going to be 2 minus x1 is going to be -2. So 3 minus 1 is going to be 2. Let's go ahead and put this into the calculator. So let me go ahead and press enter here. So then 2 minus negative 2 is going to give us a 4. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and put a 4 there. And now let's simplify. So 2 divided by 4. If you're really good with your simplification, you might already know the answer. But if you're kind of so-and-so on it, you don't feel too confident, that's fine. Just go ahead and put it on Desmos, and it'll simplify it for you. So 2 divided by 4 is 0.5, but I really recommend that you turn it into a fraction. So convert to fraction, 1/2. So that means that our slope is going to be 1/2. Now that we have the slope, now let's go ahead and look for our x1 and our y1. So x1 and y1. If you label the points ahead of time, you already know the answer to this. So our x1 is going to be -2, and our y1 is going to be 1. Now, what if you completely changed the order? Like, what if you said that this was x1 and y1? Would it change your answer? Not really, and that's the beautiful part about point slope form. Because even if you chose a different point, when you do end up simplifying it, you're going to end up getting the same line. That's what's really cool about point slope form. You can have multiple answers that are all equivalent. So your work might look different from my work, and our work might look different from our friends' work. So keep that in mind. So now that we have slope x1 and y1, let's go ahead and write our equation. So y minus y1 is equal to mx minus x1. So y minus y1, which in this case is 1, equals, our slope is 1/2, parentheses, x minus, our x1 this time is -2. So I'm going to put a parentheses -2 there. Now, because we do have a double negative there, it would be a good idea if we can simplify that. So our final equation is going to be y minus 1 is equal to 1/2. And then this double negative turns into a positive, so x plus 2. And again, the beautiful part about this is that even if you chose the other point, even when the numbers look different, if you were happen to simplify it, you would end up getting the same equation or in the same line anyways. So let's kind of recap here. If you want to write an equation in point slope form, you have to do a couple of things. First of all, you should know what point slope form looks like. So point slope form is y minus y1 is equal to mx minus x1. And in order to write an equation in point slope form, you're going to need two things. Well, technically three things. The slope, x1, and a y1. Which, if you calculate slope using the slope formula, you automatically will know what your x1 is and what your y1 is. Then, once you're armed with that information, then you go ahead and start plugging in the right numbers into the right places. And then simplify if at any point in time you end up having a double negative. Well, I hope you guys learned something new today. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment below and I'll get to you as soon as I can. If you liked the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel for more Algebra 1 videos. And as always, please take care and I'll see you guys next time.